Hello, welcome to our show. We are Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. Here we focus on what it takes to make your ideas happen and the steps you can follow to make it just a little bit easier. Subscribe to our podcast to join the ongoing conversation about all things startup business related. Find even more content on our YouTube channel, Ryan's Business Class. See the link in our description of this episode. So glad to have you here. Maybe we can learn something together. Enjoy. Hello, and welcome to our fourth edition of Business Love with Ryan. I am Ryan. We're very pleased to have you with us today. It is March 29, 2020. And it seems to be we're living in the same world we were last week. In my estimation, things seem to be a little bit better. We seem to be gaining some knowledge and understanding of the circumstances surrounding this coronavirus. But there's still a lot of work to be done, and we're still asking ourselves the question, how long will we be confined to our homes? How long will we be stuck inside? How long must we social distance from one another? And it really goes to make you think, what are some ways that we can improve our lives even while we're in confinement, even while we're alone, and we don't have people and networks upon which to build. And we talked about it last week that, this week we wanted to talk about virtual reality more in depth. Now, I had intended to talk about virtual reality as sort of a home entertainment phenomenon. You put on your headset and you can go into video games, or you can go into movies, or you can go into scenarios of your choice, or you can educate yourself from home, I suppose. And that's the end of it. Everything is from home. People are at home. What else is there to do except be at home using advanced technology to entertain yourself? But it turns out that, there's applications at every level of society for virtual reality. And the more I read, the more I realized that it is the industry of the future, not just for home entertainment, but for all business. And let me give you some examples. The articles that I was reading talked about applications in the professional world. And, I started off reading about how NASA wants to send people to Mars. And we already know that SpaceX also wants to send people to Mars. But the problem is not only how are we going to get there, which is, a 3-year journey, but how are we going to keep these astronauts from going insane during a 3-year confinement? More or less, all they can be promised is to be in a small capsule, receiving nutrition and water, and hurling through space at a high rate of speed. But even at that high rate of speed, they're still going to be in this capsule for months and months and months. And so the Russians and the Americans have both been asking themselves, how possible is it? How emotionally capable or, can people keep their wits about them under such circumstances? Because when they arrive, they're going to have to get busy building. It's not going to be, we made the trip, now everything is easy. It just stays hard. And so what NASA did is they set up a artificial environment on the side of a volcano in Hawaii, and they were going to more or less confine some individuals, potential, let's say, astronauts, in small, cramped spaces with the ability to perhaps go out on the side of the surface of this volcano. And of course, everybody's in on this. So, they've been advised on protocols, what they have to do. And, they're not supposed to go this far from base because it would conflict with the overall purpose of the test, which is how life would be if you were on Mars. So they set it up on the side of volcano, and they immediately they started having problems. The power generator went out. When they went to fix the power generator, the electrician who was working on it hurt himself very badly. He had to be sent to the hospital. And even in that period, that experience of tending to this injured man demonstrated for all present that the safety protocols in this situation were very much lacking. And, a few days later, the entire trip was called off because of serious concerns about safety. And this is on Earth. This is on planet Earth, where, help is, might be a little ways away, but it still can come, probably before you die. If you're on the side of a mountain in Mars and the same situation happens, mission failure, everybody's dead. That's the only way it can happen. And so you need to have people who have their wits about them. And if they go through a 3-year journey and at the end of it their brain is completely fried, they're going to be useless. They're going to be dangerous to the other members of the crew. There was the Russians were a little bit more staunch about the effort. They just did it. They put the guys in confinement and they watched what happened. And what they found happened was that the gentlemen who were put into these, I guess you'd call them canisters. They must have felt like sardines in a can. They started experiencing sleeplessness. They couldn't fall asleep. The entire experience put them into claustrophobia, put them into just a basic sense of physical stress. And the guys who experienced the most stress were actually very conflict-oriented, contributing to a high percentage of the conflicts that took place during this entire time. And so it shows that people can be put under a certain type of exhaustion and stress, and they might even be dangerous. Imagine going 3 years through space in Mars, opening up the capsule, and one of the guys jumps out a raving lunatic and ready to kill anyone who sees. It's not out of the question. All of that money, all of that time, all of that preparation, not to mention the human lives involved. Not to mention, is it even worth doing? So, there's still questions. One thing that has been suggested, and the reason I wanted to mention this article, is that, during this 3-year confinement, and 3 years to come back if you want them to live, I'm guessing if they send them to Mars, they're not expecting to come back. It's like, thanks for your service. All right, see you. But, 3 years at least. And so you put them in confinement for 3 years, and you put them in virtual reality to give their mind an outlet. So there needs to be, first content. Who's making all this content for virtual reality? This is the question I really want to put forth to my audience, is who's writing the show? So there needs to be something for them to do in the virtual world so that they can live some kind of a fulfilling life. They can watch movies, of course. That won't feel very virtual unless you virtually allow them to walk into a movie theater. They can, watch anything that's on YouTube. Again, not virtual. They would need games or social applications or something like this to make it so that they're still interacting with people and they're still building some sort of life, some sort of development, some sort of at least emotional evolution, or maybe in virtual reality you could write your own book, or you could paint your own painting, or you could design any number of things, real estate, cars, any sort of thing. You could have breakthroughs in this amount of time with this amount of sustained focus that you really have no choice but to apply. So that is, how the space program is sort of leading the charge in terms of virtual reality, just because they have goals and virtual reality would play a critical role in achieving that. Now, so we move on to, not outer space, but to our lives here on Earth. We're moving into a phase where we feel like we're in what's called Web 3.0. Web 3.0 is different than Web 1.0 or 2.0. We've already conquered email, and we've conquered communication, and we've conquered, watching movies and all sorts of multimedia. We've conquered business applications at a very high level. But now we're developing new technologies all at the same time that really promise to work together in a very particular way. And so, of course, we're talking about AI, artificial intelligence. We're talking about 5G. We're talking about VR and AR, which is virtual reality and augmented reality. AI, of course, is great for storing information and retrieving information, for looking at data and making sense of the data. 5G is great because it will allow all of this information gathering to actually take place at a reasonable speed. I think a lot of what AI can do would be lost in our current networks of, let's say, 4G, just because it's not fast enough. So a lot of that horsepower is missing. And then, VR and AR, which is the sort of user interface of all of this technology. They can all work together at the same time. AI, 5G, and VR can all work together at the same time. No doubt they will. No doubt they already are in many instances. And then there's a fourth piece, which is the sensor economy that is just about to emerge, which is we're about to put sensors on everything. Especially with 5G, with the ability to spread this information quickly and process the information quickly with 5G and AI. There's all sorts of applications for the world that having microsensors on everything could provide. Let's talk about the initial ones. First, we have VR training. So let's talk about VR first. Let's talk about how Walmart just bought 17,000 Oculus sets. And that's so that employees can tour vast real estate facilities faster and have an accurate understanding of how the factories work or the stores are laid out or where everything is located. And having these headsets and the ease of use involved with VR, and you can be sitting in the training room, but you're not in the training room anymore. It has improved the employee confidence at Walmart 10 to 15%. And that is confidence to do their job. That's confidence to come to work. Confidence in their ability to do a good job so that they feel job security, so that they feel like what they're doing matters. It's proven just to be a superior form of training. I mean, that's just the only way to say it. You train your people better, they're going to be happier employees. And so beyond, I would say, inventory management and beyond real estate delivery, VR is used in aviation, of course. Flight simulators were some of the earliest software on computers. Some of the earliest games you could play on computer were flight simulators. And they still are very, very popular. And they're evolving. They're becoming more and more like the actual practice of flying an airplane. But on the professional side, pilots use VR all the time. Astronauts too, to train themselves in all sorts of spacecraft or aircraft. And companies like Bell Helicopter have taken it to a whole new level. They market themselves as having extensive VR training for their helicopter pilots. Not only VR, but actual training too. The normal required actual hours, but extensive VR as well. So it's sort of a point of advertising for these high-end luxury transportation providers. Okay, so beyond inventory management with Walmart and aviation management and things like that, we have firefighters using VR to combat wildfires now, only virtually. So you can put a firefighter in some of the worst blazes in history and let them fight it out. And then they take off their Oculus headset and they're back to normal. We haven't lost any lives. We haven't wasted any equipment. We haven't even wasted any water. We haven't even burned anything down. Now, I know firefighters still do have facilities that they light on fire and then they have to go put it out. So, they're still doing the regular coursework. But VR just gives them another tool to sharpen their skills a little bit better. I mean, think about it. Maybe we can lose 10% less firefighters because they've been a little bit better trained. Over the course of a year, in a country like, let's say, Ukraine might lose, 10, 20 firefighters a year, let's say? Why not? No, less? Okay, well, I got to believe it happens sometimes, and maybe virtual reality training would make it a little bit better. I know in the United States it happens sometimes. The wildfires in California killed a lot of firefighters. And I don't want to blame them. I mean, they're heroes. Everybody knows that what they did was selfless. They stayed up days on end to fight fires just to die in the same fire. But what if the team leaders had an opportunity to really train in virtual wildfires, made it like a video game so that, there is a way out of this, but you have to figure it out just like in real life. And I think it's a great way to prepare.
the same way that if you're a boxer, maybe playing a boxing video game can help you learn something, or if you're a professional American football player, playing Madden Live can help you learn something else about football, maybe help you learn about reads and coverages. It's the same thing. Playing the game makes you better at the game. And with firefighters, it's the consequences are serious, so we should be thankful to VR for what it's providing to us. And then, finally, surgeons can use VR to practice their craft. We're getting to a point, let's call it augmented reality now, where a surgeon can look into a screen and see what he's doing with his hands much better than he could ever do it with his eyes on his hands. He can see much closer, he can see with detail, he can see better angles. That alone is a sense of virtual reality already. And I think most hospitals have some version of this already. Hospitals can put a tube down your throat with a camera on the end of it. But as we get more precise, as we develop better products for, training of doctors, you're going to want it. Let's say we don't want to talk about this yet, but later on in this section, we're going to talk about contact lenses that provide augmented reality. Well, with doctors, with surgeons specifically, you put those contacts in, and before you know it, you're performing surgery at a much more precise level because you have all of this additional data. So, most important for us here at this program, Business Love with Ryan, and then our YouTube channel, which is Ryan's Business Class. And we're thinking about developing some sort of consulting branch of what we're doing on Fiverr or Upwork, just like we talked about last week. In terms of education, the education of students, the opportunity to use VR is very high, specifically with people who do very technical skills. They work on repairing boats, or they work on repairing airplanes or large trucks. But it's very expensive to have an airplane available sitting there in a hangar to work on for a bunch of young students to work on when, every day that this airplane is not flying is $10,000 of depreciation. It's a very expensive proposition to train these guys. But now you put them in VR, they can work on the airplane until the cows come home. The sun never goes down in VR. You never lose light. You just put on that headset and you're with it. You can stay with it until you starve to death. So it's just the limits of the person learning now becomes the only limits. And it's true with, cruise ships. What are you going to do? Have cruise ships for students to learn on? Big, giant engines for them to be repairing? I'm sure it happens. Up until now, that's the way it's been. But I think there's a much more efficient way just around the corner, which is VR and VR applications. But for all of my viewers, and for the purpose of the podcast that we're doing here, they need content. And there's all different ways that somebody with no experience could create content. If it's a game, you could just write the story. Start off with writing the story of the game. Write down some features of the game that you want to have. If it's an experience, go to concerts with your own camera. And then, you would have to teach yourself, and I'm not somebody who knows about this necessarily, but I do know that if I wanted to get involved in the VR space, I would begin by educating myself, wouldn't I? I would begin by educating myself, and, I want to talk about this for business supermodels. So let's go on a little bit more into some of the other articles that I've been reading, and then we can come back to this. Finally, we want to get into the idea of a virtual workplace. Companies have really been burned by this coronavirus problem. And I think that if they switch to remote workforces, as I've said probably 100 times already on this show, they would be very well off. Well, certain companies are taking it to a whole new level already. The leader, or one of the most notable of which, is already a $1 billion valuation company. It's called EXP Realty. EXP Realty. EXP is sort of like experience points that you get from a video game, so it really does imply the VR world, the video world, a world where you interact artificially. However, it's realty. So what could that possibly mean? Well, last week I talked about being able to go into virtual reality and do work. Well, now imagine if there was let's say what EXP Realty is, which is a virtual campus. And there's all these different locations. And you can have your company headquarters there. You can have any sort of environment you want. You want to have business meetings on the beach with water? There it is. You want to have it around a swimming pool? There it is. You want to have it in a lavish marble conference room? There it is. You want to have it in the palace of the Caesar with the Romans walking all around? Why could not it also be there? It's just a real opportunity for anybody who has the imagination to see it, because it is coming, and it's going to need to be not only populated, but it's going to need to be contented. It's going to need to be, what's the word? Populated with content, I guess. Or it has to be, developed. That's the only way to say it. So, before we talk more about virtual reality, I want to talk about the sensor economy that's coming out. They call it the economy of a trillion sensors. And what that means is, well, there's an article that I read it from, and it's, we can't even comprehend the massive data haul we'll soon get from sensors. They're going to put sensors all over your body, if you want them, I guess, all over your house, all over your animal, all over vehicles, and any sort of performance-oriented devices. And you're going to have real-time data all the time that up until now has been very difficult to get. Imagine... Right now, we have more devices in the world connected to the internet than ever before, than people that live on the earth. So for every person on the earth, there's at least one device connected to the internet. But it's something probably more like 2, or maybe more. I know that I at least have 2. So there's a quote from Neil Gross, who is a sociologist, a noted sociologist, and he said, "In the next century, planet Earth will don an electric skin. It will use the internet as a scaffold to support and transmit its sensations." Well, I think that's already kind of true. I mean, we already have the World Wide Web. We already have the naturally occurring electromagnetic spectrum, which makes all of this possible. But I would say that it's, we're utilizing the electric skin that already exists on the surface of the Earth. We're now realizing ways that we can tap into it. First, it was radio waves. Radio waves already exist. We just figured out how to transmit content on them. Microwaves exist around us always. We just found a way to harness them and to channel them. And now we're going to be using 5G. And it's difficult to... 5G is sort of a delicate network. It doesn't work over as well as we would like it to yet. Obviously, we're not very far away, but we still need to develop. So by 2030, it's estimated that there will be 500 billion connected devices, and it will be an economy of about $14 trillion a year. That's bigger than China currently is. You know how many billionaires are going to come out of this reality? The simplest version of a sensor device that is out right now is this idea of the Aura Ring. The Aura Ring goes around one of your fingers, and it measures your sleep. It measures your blood flow, for most notably. And up until now, they've had sleep devices on your wrist, but the blood is too deep inside your wrist to get a very deep reading. Maybe you get 1 piece of information per second, or 12 pieces of information per second. But this device can turn out like 250 pieces of information a second, because in your finger the blood is very close, so you're more intimately connected to that data flow. So doctors will no longer need to rely on annual checkups. They'll be able to look at you at any time, look at your data at any time on the interface that your body's sensors are plugged into. And this is desirable for most people. I suppose some people will have a privacy problem, but I think most people will recognize that this is a very good way to keep themselves alive and to team up with their doctor much more closely. Now, if you want a business idea out of all of this interface that doctors use to dialogue and connect with these sensors is going to need to be developed. So how's it going to look? How's it going to feel? This is a business that can be started and will almost certainly, garner some interest. Farmers will get to know exactly how much moisture content is in both the soil and the sky, allowing them to optimize their practices to get healthier crops, bigger yields, and use less water. Within a decade, we will live in a world where just about anything that can be measured will be measured. And now that we have AI at the same time to help us make sense of all that data and to categorize it and to process it, we're on the cusp of a brand new reality. If you know what it is, you can plan your business ideas accordingly. It's a hyper-conscious planet. Now, the last thing I wanted to talk about, at least for Tech Tuesday and these articles that I wanted to focus on, was this article by Jason Dorrier, which talks about Mojo Vision's augmented reality contact lenses kick off a race to AR on your eye. In other words, they want you to be able to put contacts in your eye that have an augmented reality screen projected from them. Amazing technology. Right now, we're still in the prototype phase, but they've been able to show journalists enough to garner a lot of excitement. They've had to invent everything fresh. All the components that they use, the platform of the surface of the lens, the disinfectant bath that also serves as a charger, and the resolution is unbelievable. That they're using is 14K resolution, whereas your iPhone is probably 4K resolution. So it's 3.5 times better resolution on the surface of your eye that you'll be able to see as though it's a regular display than any devices that we have right now currently. So obviously it's still a prototype. And they had told the world at the beginning that they were going to create an AR platform. But what I surmise happened is that they thought it through. They said, okay, so we make the platform, and then what? Well, we need applications for the platform. Okay, and then what? Well, we got to market the platform. Okay, and then what? Well, then we have version 2.0. Well, what would that be? Well, version 2.0 will probably be contact lenses. Oh, so that's where we're going. Let's go there now. Let's just go there. So in a way, it's risky because they're hedging their bets that they're going to be able to make certain leaps in technology. But at the same time, they've already received over $100 million in funding. So this project did gain the interest that they were hoping. And one really useful application that may be for augmented reality contact lenses is this like a teleprompter, that if you have a public speech to make, you can just read off a teleprompter that's on the contact lens. Nobody knows that you're even reading from the teleprompter. They just sound like you're reading something from your imagination. But I think, it's just an example of how useful this could really be. And, they don't want to overhype it, but they've already been designated as an FDA breakthrough device. So the FDA is very actively looking at this product and fast-tracking its development. Beyond that, they want to focus it on visually impaired people in the beginning, probably because they think it's the most good, and there's probably a lucrative financial market for helping repair lost vision. So it's an exciting time. Augmented reality contact lenses would be good for doctors, and it's a really far cry from just 2012 when Palmer Luckey sold Oculus to Facebook for $2 billion. We've come a long way in less than 10 years. It's a very exciting time, and I'm glad to be commenting on it.